All right. Well, thank you all again for joining, and I really appreciate everyone joining after the long Memorial Day weekend. As a friendly reminder, this is the Cook County Veteran Affairs Honor Grant Application Assistance Workshop. We'll talk through the application as a whole, as well as best practices for discussion. And just to get started, I mentioned this at the top of the meeting when folks were joining in. Please use the chat box if you have any questions. Alternatively, if you'd like to raise your hand and verbally ask your question, we will enable your mic, and that way you can ask your questions at the end. Additionally, there is options for closed captioning. You just have to click the more options and turn on live captions. Towards the end, we'll enable cameras and mics again as a group so that you can talk freely as needed. But with that, I will turn over to Dee to give an introduction.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank you all for attending. Well, I guess it's morning somewhere, but afternoon technically here. So good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank you all for attending. I am Major Retired Dee Love. I'm the Director of Veteran Affairs for Cook County, Illinois. And I will pass it over to my Deputy Director, Miles Tweedy, for a short introduction from him.
Hey everyone, quick radio check, D.
Good.
Okay, great.
Good copy.
Great. So my name is Miles Tweedy. I'm a major in the United States Marine Corps Reserve at this time. I grew up in Cook County, moved away about 20 years ago when I enlisted in the Marine Corps, and spent the last 20 years living all sorts of exciting places, doing all sorts of exciting things. I'm very fortunate to be serving alongside Dee, and I understand how important this role is, and I understand how important these honor grants are, and what this really does for everybody. If there's anything I can do for anybody on any level, whether it's in this forum or in any veterans related circle, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're here to serve. That's all I have.
Thanks, Miles, and thanks, Dee. And I'm Janelle Paez-Hill. I'm a senior consultant at Guidehouse, and Guidehouse is a partner of the county in supporting this particular program among all other American Rescue Plan Act programs. We're a management consulting firm and providing support in grant management as well as program implementation like this one. So diving in here, I want to talk through briefly the agenda. We're going to talk through the eligibility for applications for honor grant, talk through application contact information, as well as the narrative, organizational chart, as well as the project schedule. Lastly, we'll talk through the budget and the requirements for final review, and then leave it off for questions and answers. So starting off with the eligibility, so to apply for the honor grant and receive the $10,000 in funding, you must be recognized as a 501c3, C4, C19, or C23 organization. You also must have 3 years of experience serving the veteran population, meaning since 2020. Also have a demonstrated ability and experience in implementing veteran service programs within one of the following priority areas, which includes benefit support services or resources, mental health, education services, or veteran security. We'll note you can do a combination of all of these, but at minimum should at least address one of these categories. You must also have a willingness to develop and follow a health equity plan to address disparities in the communities, as well as ability and willingness to collect and report the data on the program outcomes. For application contact information of note, it's pretty the standard information, such as your organization name, who the executive director is, contact information. Of note, we do require the UEI number, which was previously known as the DUNS number. This number can be found on SAMS.gov. If you had an active DUNS number, you should have automatically received the UEI number. If you're unsure of what your UEI number is, again, you can check in with their number at SAMS.gov. Additionally, you'll be required to submit your FEIN number, which is your assigned IRS number to identify tax accounts of the employer. Next, going into the meat of the actual program, we do ask you start off with a cover letter. Here we have a couple of notes of best practices for a cover letter. Your cover letter should be roughly about 1 page, consisting about 3 to 4 paragraphs addressing the Cook County Department of Veteran Affairs. You'll identify the opportunity and your organization and what you're hoping to accomplish with the $10,000. Explain why the work is important to you, how your program aligns with the Cook County veteran needs, as well as share any closing remarks on how this grant opportunity may impact your organization in the future. And this is just an example of what a cover letter could look like. Again, it doesn't have to look exactly like this. This is just best practices on what might be beneficial to include in your cover letter. Moving over to the executive summary, the executive summary should outline a description of your organization similar to the cover letter. However, it should also characterize the problem that you are addressing in the veteran community. Outline your proposed program as well as the specific activities you plan to accomplish and any personnel responsible for executing this program. You should also note your organization's experience in implementing similar programs as well as any successful projects in the past. Note any significant awards, accomplishments, distinctions, or special achievements that may be beneficial for the program as well. Now, here are some examples of the goals that are required. Again, these are examples, but wanted to ensure that folks are aware that the goals that we're looking for in these applications should be specific and explain what you're hoping to accomplish. In this example, we would note reduce veteran joblessness is not specific enough or robust enough. And we're looking for more something along the lines of support veterans to find employment in the technology industry by familiarize veterans with software programs that they may not have been exposed to during their military service. So you'll see here, it really notes how you're reducing veteran joblessness as your goal with actionable items. Next, you'll have objectives in your application process. You should think of the goals as the overarching aim. And again, thinking about that SMART framework, which consists of being specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Describe the actions you're taking during the program to meet your goals. So going back to that tech example, should be more robust than help veterans learn tech. Think more of what can be specific and something that we can actually note on whether or not you have achieved it, such as support a training regimen for 100 veterans to learn software programs that could help them find employment within 2 years. You'll see that we'd be able to check to see if you were able to support 100 veterans, check in to see if they've also been able to find employment within those 2 years. Similarly, here's another example, helping veterans to find jobs. You can note not measurable nor time-bound. So would note a better explanation would be support 5 job fairs within the next 12 months where Cook County veterans can connect with employers. Next, you have outcomes. So when thinking about outcomes, you do want to think about specifying the benefits or changes for the individuals during or after participating in the program. We'd want to look at quantitative metrics to determine whether the outcome has been achieved, to demonstrate, to what extent objectives have been met. So again, thinking about how of what veterans have found employment. So you can see here in the example on the left-hand side that many veterans will find employment is not specific enough and does not provide us with quantitative metrics. So in doing this, you would want to think about 95% of program participants will find employment with participating employers. Moving over to a different example, veterans will find more housing stability. You want to think about how we can actually think about the metrics and how it was achieved. So thinking more of 80% of veterans remain in stable housing for 1 or more years. Next in the application process, we ask for an organizational chart. We want something that's easy to visualize, similar to what you see on the right-hand side. something that also provides clarity and communication within an organization and allows the organization to see which departments have room to grow. So you'll see here that there are three departments under the executive director, but then noting that the boxes that are in the dark blue are which staff members will be involved with the proposed grant. So you can include an extensive organizational chart, or you can include just the boxes of those that will be impacted by the $10,000 funding. Of note, though, if you have many veteran programs, it would be beneficial to illustrate all the various programs that you do have under your organization and what staff members you have. This just allows for the county to get a better understanding of your organization as a whole and what opportunities that there might be in the future for your organization. Next, we want to think about the project schedule. And as a reminder, this funding grant is for $10,000 for 1 year. So we do want to see a 1-year breakdown by quarter, describing the timeline of activities for the length of the performance period. So you should insert a rough date of start and completion of specific activities for coordination, planning, implementation, and any follow-up activities. It'd also be beneficial to include any locations where these activities will take place. So on the left-hand side, you'll see an example here where veterans would receive home repairs. In Q1, you would see that they would identify potentially some family homes to participate in the program. Q2 would consist of designing and planning. Q3 would be the actual construction, and then Q4 would actually be the completion of the construction. Of note, we would also want to think through of when you would be able to measure some of those outcomes and goals that you had illustrated in the beginning of your program. So if you're looking for jobs, for example, you might want to think through how you are measuring and if there's any follow-up metrics that you'll be completing. So if veterans are getting jobs within 2 years, are they staying in those jobs, things of that nature. Again, this just gives the county a better understanding of what your program is measuring and some of the long-standing effects of the program. Next, we're moving over to the budget categories. So the budget, which we'll get further into in this presentation, is an Excel spreadsheet that you are required to submit. So this is a separate document from the PDF. That's the application component. There are 6 categories which funding can be used for. This includes personnel, so anyone who is working on the program for implementation, any fringe benefits, so connected to personnel, and travel. Travel is associated with any purposes conducting the grant-related activities. So thinking about gas, thinking about taxis, public transportation, school buses, and things of that nature. And even just thinking about any conferences. So if you're going to a conference for or like job fairs, for example, travel to the job fair could also be included. But we shouldn't be seeing any travel because you're going between your organization's offices unless you have a justifiable reason for that. You can also include equipment, so any tangible property related to the grant activity, so any computers, printers, phones. Materials and supplies is another category, so this is paper, anything materials that you think of related to the office materials. And then lastly, any indirect costs. Of note, indirect costs should not exceed 10% unless you have a NICRA rate. So then here on the right-hand side, you'll see the budget form template. This will be found in an Excel spreadsheet. The information at the top is your standard information. And then the only things that you'll be filling out will be on that right-hand side. All the cell blocks on the left-hand side are locked, so you cannot accidentally make any typos of any sort, as well as total direct costs and total project budget. So it will automatically calculate your numbers for you. So if you see that you're going over $10,000, you can make adjustments as needed as you play with your budget. As I mentioned with the indirect costs, again, indirect costs should not go over 10%. of your total amount, unless you have a NICR rate, and that's a negotiated indirect cost rate. And you should know if you have one of those, it's typically some form of a letter approving you for over 10%. Next, in that same Excel spreadsheet, there will be a tab on the bottom that asks for justification. So you'll just have to explain what are you using that funding for. So if you're using the funding for personnel, who is the personnel that you would be using that funding for? And if you don't have, like if it's for a new hire, you can put the name as TBD, but put in what the title is, explain what their role would be, and things like that. Again, going back to that travel piece, if you want approval of this budget, really explain and justify why travel is essential for your program. All right, and next, related to the budget piece, we know that you probably have multiple funding streams for various programs, whether it's through another grant, maybe it's through some donations. We just want to make sure that the funding that you receive from Cook County is not being duplicated by multiple funding streams. And what we mean by that is just ensuring that the funding sources aren't paying for the same items. So for example, if one grant is paying for boxes of pens, you cannot include that in the budget for another grant. So similarly, applicants cannot serve the same people with multiple grants and count them twice. So if you are having a home repair program and you only need $10,000 for that home repair, you should not be justifying your budget based off of this funding stream if you already have funding. Of note, however, if you need, say, 50,000 and you don't have the full 50,000 just as of yet, you can still use, of course, the HONA grant to fund the program, but just note that you are receiving funding elsewhere and that this would be just a component of your current program. And then lastly, here we have the evaluation criteria and the breakdown. So you can see here the grant award term and eligibility criteria is worth 20 points. This is consisting of all the documentation that you're required to submit. So that's the letter of recommendation, proof that you are a 501c3, etc. Then next you have the key application concept and priorities, which is worth the most amount of points. So I would encourage you to spend the most amount of time for that piece of application. The financial and health equity plan is worth 20 points, followed by the application budget development and requirements worth 15 points. This is broken down in additional documentations on the HONA grant website as well, if you want that for reference. And that leads me to the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, please throw it in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, feel free to do so. And I see that we did have 2 questions come through. So the first question is, once approved for an award, when would funding be granted? So this is actually dependent on how quickly you submit the required documentation. So of note, once you're awarded the grant, it does take some time to get that check written to the organization. And what is required is that if you need a W-9 is required by the county, as well as a signed agreement saying that you will implement the program that you said you were going to do in order to receive the $10,000. Additionally, there's a question about where you can find the budget Excel spreadsheet that can be found on the website, and I will throw in the link here as well. Any other questions? And I do want to give a friendly reminder, we are 30 days out from, or I should say 31 days until the application is due. Please don't wait to the last minute to submit the application, and please give yourself enough time for submission. It is due at 11:59 on June 30th. And I just enabled all mics. So if you do have a question and you want to unmute yourself, feel free to do so and jump in. All right, well, if there's no other questions and you think of any other questions down the line, feel free to email this contact email, veterans.affairs@cookcountyil.gov, and or please visit the Honor Grant website for Q&A.
Excuse me, I do have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I appreciate the opportunity. I'm Pure Plus Education and Training Advocates, and working with veterans, especially female veterans, is very new to us. But we are looking to partner with an agency that has already been providing services to veterans. Are partnerships encouraged?
Yeah, absolutely. And Dee, I will let you speak further to that.
Yes, partnerships are encouraged and allowed. The only thing is, we would require I believe within the application packet, it is noted like a conflict of interest form. So, just to make sure that like both agencies aren't receiving the funding for the same program. However, if you do choose to collaborate with another agency that has, expertise or can help to expand your services and your capabilities, that is allowed.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
And again, I apologize for that, but I think you did answer the questions. And when there's a partnership, both of us have all the criteria that you're looking for. We're both 501s. I've been around for over 20 some years, but again, this is a new area for me. And so what I'm looking at is if my agency is providing one piece, the balance needs to be with the person that works directly with the VA, with the veterans, if I'm correct. I know it may seem a little convoluted, but that's what we're trying to make sure, that we're not overstepping each other with the services that we provide, but we feel that if we work together, that it would be, a better fit.
Yeah.
As long in your narratives and then the budget, as long as it is clearly stated and clearly outlined, we will refer to the reviewers at that point. But yeah, just make sure that, whatever it is, if there's a collaboration, you guys aren't wanting to step on each other's toes with it, just ensure that in the, the application narrative and additionally within the budget, that it's just clearly stated and outlined so that our reviewers will have the opportunity to see the collaborative lines of effort, and then additionally the separation in programs.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate it. Thank you, ladies.
You're welcome. We have another question that says, is there a formal conflict of interest form for Veterans Affairs, or can we use our own? I'm going to touch base with you on this one, Ms. Janelle, but I believe it's fine if you guys write your own, your own memorandum. But Janelle, do we have a formal form? I'm having a brain fart. I didn't think so either. Okay, so no, they're just a standard memorandum for record or a letter just stating if there is a conflict of interest and who the conflict of interest is with, and if not, then that'll suffice.
Yep, exactly. So I will note also, if you do have a partnership, there is an additional question in the application that asks what the partnerships are and how does that work depending on the programs. And if you are not partnering, it is an optional component. So just say not applicable or skip that piece. But for those that are having partnerships, there is a specific question specifically for that. And on that note, I do want to also emphasize that in order to have a complete application, you must submit all documentation and fill out all required information. So this includes the Excel spreadsheet related to the budget. So ensure that you fill out both tabs, as well as keeping a list of all of the requirements that are needed. So proof of the 501c3, etc., any letter of recommendation, I believe proof of it, various documentation is required. So make sure you are submitting all of those documentation in order to have a complete application by that deadline. So I will encourage you all to submit that as soon as possible or get started on that. Especially if you have any questions, I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to reach out via this email, the veterans.affairs@cookcountyil.gov. If you have any questions, maybe that you don't have something, or you're not sure what one of the questions are asking, you have ample opportunity to get your questions answered. All right, last call. Any other questions for the honor grant piece? All right. Well, if there's no other questions, again, feel free to reach out via the email, and we will be sure to respond back as soon as we're able. I will also note that website cookcountyil.gov/honor grants has a plethora of resources available to you all to refer back to, as well as this recording and PowerPoint slide deck. So I know there were some folks that joined a little late. There will be this recording available to review and reference, as well as this slide deck. And with that, I will end this recording. And I thank you